Okay, something went wrong because there was no audio on that video at all. I just heard like this tick. So I'm hoping
I
that people like heard that.
Okay. Can they hear us now? Let's hope.
Yeah, it's working
Okay,
now. I
great.
don't know what happened.
Okay.
Anyway, welcome to another Dragonlance Saga Creator episode, everyone. My name is Adam, and today I'm being joined by the talented artist illustrator Mike Perry. Now, he has over 20 years as a professional career in the industry, and he's currently working as a storyboard artist in advertising, as well as freelance concept and character artist in the video game and film industries. And you can find links to his work in the description of this video below. I would like just to take a brief moment and thank the members of this channel and invite you to consider becoming a member if you're not already. And of course, you can pick up Dragonlance gaming materials by using the affiliate links. Now, thank you, Mike, so much for joining me. How you doing, man?
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Again, I apologize about any technical hiccups here that we had at the very beginning, but we were just chit-chatting, having a good conversation before we started going live, and so maybe that's what it was. It was my computer saying, no, we have more stuff to talk about. Let's forget the images. Let's forget the video. Let's just focus on the conversation. So let's get into it. Now, this is, again, the first time that you and I are meeting, but we both share a passion of family, wilderness space, and of course, Dragonlance. So, and you're an artist. I'm in advertising, a graphic designer. So we have a shared artistic background, just different avenues of it. Let's start with that. What was it that sort of put you in that trajectory of artist?
Larry Elmore's covers from Dragonlance, right there. I mean, I was always interested in art, comic books, that sort of thing as a kid. But I started reading Dragonlance when I was probably in the fifth grade. Fourth, fifth grade, I can't remember, elementary school, and the cover of the first Chronicles, Dragons of Autumn, Twilight, just caught me. And from there on, pretty much, I remember all throughout junior high school, I was just copying Dragonlance covers and art, and I have the art of Dragonlance book here still. The dog-eared copy from when I was a kid.
That's great.
And that was it, man. That got me into and started me down my career path.
I used to, in art class, I would take the Autumn Twilight book in, and they had those sort of chapter heading illustrations. I think it was like Bavets or someone did those. They were just great. They just filled me with like tons of excitement just looking at the chapter heading. And so I'd recreate those in art class and do watercolors, and my friends would buy them and stuff. Like, it's a genuinely, I think even more than the story of getting someone into playing Dungeons and Dragons, the art inspired more than the actual writing, I think, in most cases. At least.
I agree completely. And for me, like I said, it started me on my career, and it really informed my imagination as I read the book. I mean, you could just, okay, Sturm's doing something, and then you look at the cover and that's him, that's what he looks like. And then you would follow along, and sometimes you'd expand on it, sometimes not. Right now I'm reading the Chronicles with my youngest daughter, who's 9, and we're having a great time, although she keeps falling asleep while we're reading, but we're having a great time. And it really inspires me to, she's going through it for the first time, and she's hooked and she loves it. And she has all these ideas about the characters look like. And she did a little drawing of I'm losing the name here, the capital city of the Quillanasti Elves.
Quillanast.
Quillanast. See, I'm blanking out because I'm on camera here, but she did this really neat drawing of the Tower of the Sun.
Yeah.
And I was just blown away. It was so cool, and it just got me like, I got to start drawing Dragonlance again. So that's it reignited my passion for the franchise, because I've been following it since I was since the 80s.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, I bought every single thing I could get my hands on. Everything, like the miniatures, the modules, the books, awesome. All of that stuff. So I'm a big fan. I'm a super fan.
So when you're reading it to your daughter, does she have a favorite character yet?
She likes the girls. She likes Gold Moon. That was her favorite character from the first book, and now we're on the third book, and it's mostly about Lorana.
Yeah.
And she hates Katara, and
oh no.
And she keeps interrupting us while we're reading, like, why is she doing that? She's so mean. What does she do?
I guess that's a good thing. That it means she has a good moral compass.
Oh yeah,
like, good job,
well,
Dad. But
Kitty,
sometimes it's nice to be bad, like Kitiara.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I'm reading it again. I've read the Chronicles multiple times, but every time I read it, I get something else out of it.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at it, it's been years, so I'm getting a fresh perspective. And for the female characters like Lorana, I never really thought of her as a princess throughout the series. She was always Tannis's love interest, and then she was the Golden General. But I don't think of her in her role as royalty, and so that's adding some interest to it for me. Like I said, you get something new out of every time. And she didn't care for Alhana Starbreeze at all.
Oh wow.
Well, she's not, like, because she's so cold and kind of distant and not very nice. And there's not a lot of they don't flesh her character out very much in the books. So yeah.
Yeah, not until, geez, after the Fifth Age do they even bother with giving her some sort of contextual personality, which I thought was really, really weird, because she's like, she meets up with the companions in Tarsus to try to get someone, it doesn't even matter who, just someone to help her liberate her forest, Sylvanesty, her homeland. But I don't know, maybe send your most charismatic person, at least.
I think she was the only one to send. There must have been how it played out. I like thinking about this stuff. I stay up at night thinking about, well, what is the commerce? How did that work in Tarsus? And where did people come from? And what do they trade? Like, I think of these things as a concept artist. You train your brain to think of everything, and it helps inform your work. But like you said, the Fifth Age, I have not read any of that stuff. I read, the legends and the tales and the preludes, and I read all of that kind of stuff. I love, books like the Legend of Huma, the Heroes series, and then I kind of just maxed out. That was where I drew the line. And when they started releasing new, the newer iterations of the story, I didn't want to go there. I didn't want, not that it, like, I don't have any exposure to it. I kind of kept it minimum. I like what I like, and I'm going to stay in that zone. So I would like to know more about it, but I think it would be I'd end up with a library of books about this high of all the different stories. I just fall down that rabbit hole.
It's an insane amount of books that they have just set in the setting. But I think that's the strength of Dragonlance really as an IP, is that you have these sort of defined eras that if you just connect with that particular era, you really don't have to go beyond it. You can just stay in this one space, and there is just tons of stories. And, to your point about, as a concept designer, you have to sort of understand the world that you're sort of concepting. I'm just extrapolating a little bit there, but the idea of context to why characters look and act the way they do is something that is so integral to Dragonlance, I think arguably over any other setting, because you do have a character like Lorana, who, as you had mentioned, is a princess, but she's never really treated like one, because, she's initially presented as a spoiled brat. And then she develops into this well-rounded, not human, but well-rounded woman who then has compassion for others other than her own race, which is something, again, very rare, not just in Dragonlance as a whole, which it is, but then more specifically in the Quillency Elves, and then even more in royalty. And then she's given this position of authority over other soldiers, other human soldiers, which is unheard of, especially as Solamnic Knights. Like, that's a sexist organization if there ever has been one. No woman can get close to it. And then even beyond women, no man that's not of Solamnic lineage can be a knight, and until later years. And so it just shows you how impactful that character of Lorana was to someone like Gunther Wistan, to then allow him to then give her that position of Golden General, to showcase her strengths. Like, that's the foresight that he had. And then, it's those ideas about why was she able to get to that place and no other character was. And then you sort of delve into the contextual backstory of, the development of royalty in Quillency, and it becomes this huge sort of rabbit hole of world building that had already been done for us to then follow. But if you just want to read these books on a surface level, then it's just a nice fantasy story. But if you really want to dig into them, it's there. Like, it's all there for you to go. And that's what I love so much about it.
Well, throughout the books, she's Lorana, daughter of the Speaker of the Sun. And then now, if people refer to her, like the Wikipedia, Lorana Canaan. I don't know, how do you pronounce it? Canaan?
However you like. I say
Canaan.
Canaan. But,
that's how the stories have, more has been added to the story. They fleshed out her character even more, and I love that. I think that's great. And it's nice being a super fan and having that material to dig into. And what can I say? I'm just nerding out. This is great talking about Dragonlance right now.
We're going to get back to you and your career in just a second. I want to tie into one more little canon thing. It always bugged me when Porthios took them to the Slaamori and Kith Cannon's corpse was just like sitting in a throne. Yeah. That's literally his like ancestor, Porthios's ancestor, and arguably, technically, it's Tanis's ancestor too through his mom's marriage to Porthios's dad's brother. But that's a weird family relationship. But like, if Kith Cannon was going to give this sword to someone, anyone, which again, a skeleton giving someone a sword is a weird thing, wouldn't it have been Porthios? Or I'm sorry, not Porthios, but Gilthanas, thank you.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it have been him? Like, he's the direct descendant. I don't know. Well,
and why is there a giant slug guarding Kith Cannon's tomb, And why would the elves have undead soldiers wandering around guarding the place, because that doesn't sound very elvish to me. The Chronicles are weird because, and I've watched interviews later, and you read about the development of the IP. I think they were figuring it out as they were going along, and it sounds like the development process was just for Weiss and Hickman to write was really short, and they're combining elements from the game. They're just riffing and making it happen quickly. So that's probably one of those moments that kind of slipped through the cracks. And for guys like us, we're like, well, that doesn't make sense. I wonder why would they do that? And what did they have inside the tomb there? They had the banshees, or there were elven women who were trapped in there, and Rassilon had to use his magic to kind of hold them at bay as they went through. Or was it Gold Moon? I just read it like a month ago.
Yeah,
but you know what I'm talking about,
right? It gets so crazy with the situations. I mean, ultimately, they wanted to do a dungeon crawl and flesh that out, and so they had to throw like random monsters in there and stuff. But I don't know. I'm like, I love talking about it and just sort of dissecting it. Let's steer back to you here, because
sure.
You are an incredibly talented artist, and
thank you.
When I saw your work, I was a little bit blown away, because it's like, how would you describe your style? Because I would describe it as like hyper realism. Like it's fantasy, but the way you produce these. And let's show the people what I'm talking about here. Okay, well, this is a non-color one, but you'll see it here in a second. But the style, it feels like it's a portrait of a person, but stylized rather than an illustration of a character. And that's why I say it's sort of like this hyper reality. How would you describe your style?
Fantastic realism, maybe. I've never really put a label on it, to be honest, because when you're working on it, you're just focused. I really enjoy realism, and I've always been, I love the idea of bringing something to life in a way that is believable. Right. And with these characters and all these beloved IPs that we grew up with in the 80s, it's like, what would He-Man look like as a real person? That idea was always in my head as a kid.
Dolph
right?
Lundgren is what he looks like.
Yeah, well, he didn't look too bad. I don't know about the mullet, but
that was so great.
They didn't do a great job on Skeletor. The actor did a good job, but the look, they couldn't pull it off. And that gold mask, I don't know what they were thinking, but to get back to it, I just enjoy trying to visualize things. And as an artist, I'm a trained painter, fine artist, so I really enjoy the challenge to be able to make something look real, believable. And it just takes more time and energy, and every piece is a learning process. And that's what keeps me motivated. That's what keeps me doing this, because it's a lot of hours of rendering, but it just seems to fly by, and I love it. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I want to ask, because there's it's one thing, you have raw talent as a young man, and you're sort of exploring your artistic sensibilities. It's one thing to look at fantasy novels and their covers, be inspired by the art and stuff, and it's another thing entirely to make that your profession. Were your parents really supportive of you exploring that aspect?
My parents were supportive. They are supportive, but they never understood. I mean, my mom's a nurse, my dad's an electrician. They're very, they understand those worlds, right?
Right.
And say, I want to be an artist. Oh, are you gonna be able to eat? How are you? How's that gonna work? And oh, yeah, they're like, he'll grow out of it. He'll get a real job. And you know, um, it's like I said, by the time I was in the 7th or 8th grade, that's all I wanted to do was draw. I drew all the time. When I wasn't drawing, I was painting Dragonlance miniatures. When I wasn't doing that, I actually built out of wood, like Flint Fireforge's axe, and
Oh,
I built all this stuff, right? And made costumes and props, and I was just totally involved in the world. And then after Dragonlance, I went into other things, and it sparks my imagination, and then I want to bring my imagination to reality. And so I start drawing these things, and you want to get better, and it just goes from there. And then I want to make a living at it, just like the guys who did all the art for TSR back in the day. And
yeah.
that's what started me on my path. And my parents, they just saw that I was working hard and I was happy, and they didn't understand how I could make a go of it.
Mm.
But and it took a long time. Like it's not a well-traveled path, and there's not a lot of defined milestones and trajectories, especially like I'm in my mid 40s. So the internet was just in its infancy when I was starting my career.
Yeah.
So even getting, like, when I was submitting to companies, you'd have to put together a mail-in portfolio and mail
Yeah.
it, and then hopefully maybe you'll get a response. And I lived in a city that didn't have much of an arts industry at all. So I think that kept me back, and it was harder for me to get work. So I was taking odd jobs. I've done like architectural illustration and
Yeah.
I don't know, you name it, just whatever I could get my hands on.
Yeah.
So the more you do, I don't know, I guess I would say my parents, they saw I was working, I was able to find work, make work. And now, I mean, he's a working artist, and that's how it went.
That's great. I think
Hmm.
the hardest part for me as a parent is having faith that the decisions that my children make are actually
Hmm.
good for them, because as every
Hmm.
parent, you think this, I don't want to project here. I think
Hmm.
this is probably the most challenging thing I've done emotionally as being a father. It's
Hmm.
very, very difficult for me. And
Hmm.
to then extrapolate that out saying, okay, the decisions that you make as a child, my child, uh, are going to be the right ones after the struggle that I went through as a young man. My
Hmm.
immediate go-to is, no, you have no idea what you're talking about. You don't know the real world.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
if they came up and they said, "Oh, I want to be a hairdresser." I'm like, "Well, what, do you hate money? Like, you're not
Hmm.
going to be able to live as a
Hmm.
hairdresser. You're going to be scraping by with rent." But,
Hmm.
so I can only imagine. I mean, I'm in the arts industry, so I know that there is an industry there. But if I
Hmm.
weren't, I would definitely
Hmm.
imagine that being a difficult thing for them to sort of rationalize. Like, you want to make pictures for a living?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
what? We heard those stories about those fine artists. They cut their ears off
Hmm.
and they'd live destitute. Like, is that what
Yeah,
you're looking
yeah.
for?
I don't think they still really understand it or believe it. And whenever I talk to them about
He's
it,
really a
I
drug
just
dealer.
yeah, I just explain to it, it's work,
Yeah.
And it's been helpful. I mean, now that I'm in advertising more, there's a product at the end of the line. So
Yeah.
there's a commercial for Tide. And I said, well, I did that. Here's the storyboards and here's the animatic. And then they can kind of put two and two together, which is great. But I hear you. Like my eldest daughter, she just wants to draw characters all day. She loves drawing, and
That's
they
cool.
both draw all the time. And so I'm trying to, I mean, I still have that conditioning my parents, like, you got to support yourself and you got to be responsible. And what are you going to
Yeah.
do with your life?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm trying to balance that out and encourage them more than I was and
Yeah.
support them. And I'm in a position where I can help them and train them. And, when my daughter gets a little older, I can take her on more like an apprentice and really show her the ropes. And for example, like one of the storyboard agencies I work with, there's another artist whose teenage daughter started working for them. Just her dad showed her the way, and then she just went straight
Wow.
out of high school into the industry. So, that's a viable path, like you said. It's
Mm.
just I don't know. I I'll just try to help them as best I can, and we'll
Yeah.
see where it goes. I want them to be happy
Yeah.
regardless, and but I do want them to be successful. I don't want them to struggle. And
Mm.
they see, as a freelancer, there's good months and bad months, and maybe they're getting a good understanding of that, and hopefully it'll help them in their career,
Yeah.
whatever they choose.
Yeah. I think probably the best advice I ever got
Hmm.
was from one of my instructors who in college, and he was telling me that he was telling the class the idea of happiness is conflated with money
Hmm.
a little bit too
Hmm.
much. Like lifestyle. We look at people with such great riches and we think, well, they
Hmm.
must be happy, and generally the truth is the opposite, is that they're
Hmm.
never around to enjoy the money that they're earning, and they're constantly busy and stressed out. And there's like
Hmm.
this sort of social median amount of money that you can make where you're not working too much so you can enjoy the money that you're making, but you're not making too little in order to then not worry about money, not constantly keep an eye on your balance in your bank account, for example. And happiness is defined as living within your means. So no matter
Hmm.
what income you're making at any given time, as long as you're living in your means and you're
Hmm.
able to break out of the profession side, that's where you can actually find happiness. And so I've always tried, no matter where my career has taken me, to try to keep that in the forefront of my mind. Like living in your means, don't go into massive debt. Buy a home that you're going to be able to afford if you lose your job, or you can't,
Hmm.
live for, if you can't work for a couple weeks because of an injury or something. Like make sure that you're going to be okay if shit hits the fan, if you have these
Hmm.
massive
Hmm.
medical bills, because then
Hmm.
you're not worrying about how you're going to survive. You're just enjoying surviving, you're
Hmm.
enjoying the ride. So that's like what I'm going to be, trying to impart to my kids. Like, don't worry about what the Joneses are doing down the street. Don't be chasing
Hmm.
their lifestyle. Don't look at
Hmm.
social media. I don't even let my kids on social media at all. But
Smart.
don't don't look at social media
Hmm.
posts and
Hmm.
think that that is an ideal to
Hmm.
aspire to. Think about what
Hmm.
you believe would make you happy and work toward that, and then find joy in the process. That's the
Hmm.
important part. Being a parent sucks, man. It's so hard,
Hmm.
and you're
It
constantly
is.
second guessing yourself. And
Hmm. It's a
ah,
tough job. It's a lot of work, and you never really get a day off, and you just care so much.
that's the
And
worst part.
yeah, you
I wish
care.
I could be indifferent, but I can't.
Oh man, I'm 100% on the same page. And for me, I just try to model those values that you were
Yeah.
describing. Be responsible, try to not get too high, not get too low, roll with it, and celebrate your successes, and also try not to get too down when you have failures, and try to I don't like when I think of when my parents, what they modeled. I try to take the good from that and
Yeah.
build on it and try to transfer that to my kids. And they're young, but they're around me enough that I think it'll rub off, because it seems that's how it worked for me.
Mhm.
The elders in my life, those types of lessons about being responsible fiscally and living within your means and trying to, just be a good person and make wise decisions. I learned that from them kind of by osmosis, not because I wanted to listen to them and
Yeah.
absorb it. I just sort of picked it up and, um, you know, uh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. I
Hmm.
want to put a pin in the idea of success here because I want to explore
Hmm.
that just one more second. But I want to give
Hmm.
a shout out to the people in chat. First of all, Aaron, welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for becoming a member. Chris, it's always great to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Horrific Podcast, you guys are awesome. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate you. Benjamin, what's happening? Thanks for tuning in. Goldmoon, good to see you. Really appreciate you. All right, so there's a question here from Chris. What is your favorite Dragonlance character? And then your
You
favorite
know,
one to paint.
my favorite character, I really liked Gilthanus when
Mm.
I was younger. I liked his outfit.
Yeah.
Dressed up as him for Halloween. I
Oh,
just thought
cool.
his outfit was super cool, and then I liked him. I thought he was really cool. I liked that he was a fighter mage.
Yeah.
I liked dual class characters when I played D&D, and I liked all that about him. And he was a pretty cool character. Uh, and my favorite to paint, I mean, I don't have one. Right now, I'm going through the characters from DL6, Dragons of Ice, and I'm having a hard time painting Sturm and Lorana. So those are the
Mm.
hardest ones for me. The
Why is that?
one that came the easiest was Flint. He was my first one that I really kind of was able to wrap my teeth around,
Yeah.
and just wrap my head around. Sorry. Um, I think characters like Sturm and Lorana, I care about them. They're very
Oh.
integral characters, and Sturm, all that armor. Armor is a real pain, and especially because they're in a Arctic setting.
Yep.
It's basically a reflective silver suit, and to paint that dull reflection of that blue and gray and
Right.
everything, it just dulls everything out and it doesn't look interesting. And
Mm.
I'm really struggling with that. And Lorana, um, trying to like you showed earlier one of my concept images of her outfit. What is she wearing in
Yeah.
this module, right? And I've been really struggling with her look, and I'm thinking about her, and I'm thinking about things like elves' ears. What do the elves' ears look like in Dragonlance? Like, what do you think they look like? Do you big, long, pointy ones from Warcraft, or just small ones like in the Elmore versions,
Oh, I
or
hope they're not
how? Like,
long ones like Warcraft.
well, it's a personal preference, and
Yeah.
and as the artist, I get to pick that.
Hmm.
But these things I'm stuck on. So let me know. What do you
Yeah.
think? How do you
For
imagine the
Lorana,
ears?
I mean, just
Mhm,
elves in general in Dragonlance, I would always go with,
mhm,
I mean, first of all, when you're talking Dragonlance, you have to go back to the original artist because, they were
mhm,
so great about
mhm,
whoever painted the character first,
mhm,
that's what the character always looks like moving forward. And so they're
mhm,
great with sort of maintaining the integrity of a character's look, unless
mhm,
it's Goldmoon Pants. But other than
mhm.
Goldmoon's Pants, it's pretty good. Um,
Yeah.
but like, it's got to be that short sort of that little tip in my opinion, like
Mhm,
I,
mhm,
I think of elves as um like a gymnast human, they're
mhm,
just a little thinner, a little more lithe, and just
mhm.
little pointy ears, and that's kind of it.
Okay, okay. I see that more the same. There's a lot of like Lord of the Rings when they gave all the dwarves pointy ears. That blew, I'm like, no, that's weird. No, elves have pointy ears. Dwarves don't have pointy ears. And
I don't think I ever
you,
noticed that.
yeah, they do. If you watch the
Oh, that's
Hobbit
gonna drive
series,
me nuts.
yeah, no, they have pointy ears, but they're shaped differently, right? And Kender have pointy ears, and are the ears
Mm.
different? And what do gnomes' ears look like? I'll sit down, I'll take an idea like that, and I'll draw,
Oh
a whole page
man.
of ears. Just what does this look like? I don't know, and whatever. And because I'm doing this project for fun,
Yeah.
I can take as much time as I want. I can do
Hmm.
whatever. And normally when I'm working, I've got deadlines. I've got people, we need this yesterday, let's go. And it's like working in advertising is very deadline orientated. It's very busy. So this is like when I'm doing the Dragonlance stuff for myself, it's just pure fun. I'm just like you're looking here for some Frostreaver ideas,
Yeah.
and it's just well, I want to see what would Frostreaver look like. Would it look like this? I'm not sure. Let's try
God,
this
do you ever
idea.
put up polls of which one people like respond to?
Um, so I do a little bit on my Instagram page, but would welcome any feedback and thoughts. I love having conversations about Dragonlance
Yeah.
and ideas. I mean, let's go for it. Sure, polls are great. I mean, in the
Let us
bottom
know
row,
in the
you can.
chat which one of
Yeah.
these do you prefer? What number of these Frost
Okay.
Reavers do
Sure.
you prefer? And we'll see what they say. So yeah,
Mhm,
you've alluded to the idea that you're working on this sort of Dragons of Ice
mhm,
DL6 project. Well, let's talk
mhm.
about that. What is this? How did it come about?
The first module I got was DL6 Dragons of Ice. I was probably around, I don't know, let's say 12, and I went. There was one main store in my town that had all the Dungeons and Dragons stuff. It was, if you guys are familiar with Forgotten Realms, remember Elminster's Tower, how they would describe this tower, this old, just full of books, floor to ceiling books, wood. It had two-door construction, a lot of wood everywhere. It was this great place, and it smelled like old books, and it was floor to ceiling Dungeons and Dragons. I loved this place. And
Wow.
I went in there and I was obsessed with Dragonlance. I wanted some Dragonlance stuff. And that was the module I picked up. They didn't have DL 1 through 3
Hmm.
because this was later, so most of it was out of print by that
Yeah.
point. And they had DL6. I picked up DL5, Dragons of Mystery, but that's not really a game. It's just
Source
the
book. Yeah.
information, the source book. And DL6, I just love the cover. And being from
It is a
Canada,
great
and
cover.
it was interesting. I mean, look, the dragons slashing the rigging on the ice ship, and Lorana's pointing at the dragon, and I'm sitting there like, yes, yes, I want
Hmm.
this. This is the story for me. And that was the one that got me. That was my first Dragonlance module, and the one that inspired me, and it still does to this day. And I was really bummed out when it wasn't in the books, when they
Hmm.
didn't put it in the books. I mean, later they did in the tales, but kinda and sorta,
They
and
they actually did
you
flesh
know.
it out in the Lost Chronicles. So there's a trilogy of
Okay.
books called Lost Chronicles, which are the books
Hmm.
in between the actual Chronicles. to sort of fill in the gaps that they had left. And it's pretty interesting. It's different than the Tales story though. Like, and so this is the thing that everyone has to understand about Dragonlance is that it's not consistent. It's never.
Yeah.
So whenever someone
Yeah.
like starts yelling at you or like shaking their fist that you're saying, you know, your version is wrong because you're recounting what you remember from a story you read or something, it always has changed. Every character's alteration has changed in everything. It's like Star Wars, where George Lucas's original ideas are completely shifted through the act of writing and filming. Like it's always like that. And Dragonlance is no different. So whenever they present a story, just know that someone's probably in the future, and it could even be the same authors, they're going to change it, and it's going to like not be consistent. You just kind of have to accept it and move on. And don't get so upset when people are referencing older versions that they prefer versus the newer version that you prefer. Just enjoy what you like.
I like it like that because then it's more of a blank canvas. And this is our fantasy, I'm enjoying it as a fan, and this is what I imagine. And I used to imagine myself in the module going on the adventure with them. And it would happen differently, right?
Yeah.
You know, I see things differently, and you know, doesn't matter. We're all fans here. We can all have a good conversation and tell some fun stories. I feel bad. The sun's starting to set outside here, and my camera looks like it's getting really dark.
It's
I mean,
scary.
I've got
I'm
a
actually
light
not having a
above me.
conversation with anyone. I'm just talking to myself.
Is that a little better? It's a little
That's a little bit
extra
better.
light. Okay, sorry guys. Next time I'll get a better light setup going on. Yeah.
I love how you drew Gilthan's right here. It looks great.
I don't like the face. I'm redoing that right now. Yeah, I
didn't want to say anything, but no, I'm just kidding.
Well, you know, no, I didn't like that face, but I wanted to update his outfit a little. I wanted to give it. So when I'm doing this, so I guess you asked about this Dragonlance project I gave myself. So my daughter's really inspired by Dragonlance, and it got me inspired into doing some Dragonlance drawings of my own. And I've worked for several RPG companies, but I've never had an opportunity to work on this, my most beloved franchise. So I've, you know, during downtime between jobs, I'm working on this stuff for fun for me. And I'm really having a great time. It's fun. And this is, when I was a kid, I used to do this stuff, but I didn't have the skill to visualize it, to realize it. And now I can, and I am. And I'm just noodling around, taking my time, and just concept designing the module, how I would do it for any other client job, and seeing where it takes me. And so that's what I'm working on right now. So, you know, designing different characters, figuring out their outfits. You know, this is Lorana, so variations on how her armor would work. My aesthetic, I want to make them more realistic and you move like believable, and try to flesh them out a bit more.
So, I mean, is there like an end game in planning phase here? I mean, are you going to release it as like a concept book of DL6? I mean, are you going to sort of like, what's your plan after you've sort of landed on final versions of these characters and situations and stuff?
Well, I mean, I don't own the rights to the IP. This is fan art, so I couldn't make, you know, all you people listening with Blizzards, I mean, I'm not trying to make money off of you,
right.
You know, but I would love to contribute to the Dragonlance lore and share my passion for the IP with the rest of the community. And right now you know, here's the thing. If you start the project with the end goal in mind, so like I'm going to make a product and I'm going to sell it or trade it, or I have a thing, it starts to influence your decisions. And right now I'm just trying to maintain this creative energy and just keep it going, and let it just enjoy the ride. Yeah. Because this is a passion project. I love this. And in the end, if it turns into something, there's lots of options, you know, it will. And I'll explore those ideas. And if other people have ideas, I love talking about Dragonlance, so bring it on. But no, I don't have you know, an art book I'm going to put out. I don't have a plan for one yet. But if you think that idea has merit, then, you know, let's talk. That's great.
I definitely think it has merit. Yeah. I think it would be a fantastic exploration of not. I'm like, Larry Elmore did this wonderful job of working out how, like, the skiffs work on the ice, the planes. oh my gosh, Ice Reach, how
Mm-hmm.
they would sail across the ice and stuff. He had like tons of different concept designs. He worked out how the Dragonlance fit in the saddle and how it
Mm-hmm.
actually
Mm-hmm.
maneuvered in the saddle and how the knight would sit behind it and hold it and use it. Like he has
Mm-hmm.
tons of these little concept sketches out that they released. Of course, you have Art of the Dragonlance
Mm-hmm.
Saga, so you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they release it in this sort of collection. Right now, Wizards of the Coast has sort of opened up the DMs Guild website, dmsguild.com, I think it is, and you can actually create your own, I don't know if it's short stories, but you can create your own modules and create your own sort of Dungeons and Dragons accessories in Dragonlance. They take a piece of the profits, you get a piece of the profits because you're using their IP. I think this would be a great extrapolation of that. And there's other artists who are doing creative work for other companies, other third-party companies that are creating modules or source books in Dragonlance and selling them. They're just creating the art form and they're getting paid just for the individual art pieces. So that's
Mm-hmm.
another way that you could do it. I mean, if anyone from WotC is ever watching this, definitely give this man an opportunity. I mean, if you want to talk about raising the bar of Dragonlance artwork, I mean, I think your work is the perfect avenue to sort of take. It's a completely different aesthetic approach than what's been taken thus far, but it has this sort of realistic sensibility that you've clearly alluded that you're going for, that has never really been seen and is an exciting way of exploring Dragonlance. And it's that bridge, the way I'm looking at it, it's that bridge between the novels slash modules and an actual film or a series.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
Yep.
that great sort of midway point between real on-screen action and just enjoying it as a fan in fiction.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is exactly what I'm going for, is a how I would concept design for AAA game. It's like we were talking with The Last of Us earlier, but that's sort of level, a cinematic, film game, combine the modules and the novels, and maintain that aesthetic, the original aesthetic, the Larry Elmore aesthetic, that sort of thing. I like fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons fantasy from the 80s. I like that aesthetic. It's more believable. I don't like seeing people with swords that are 8 feet long swinging around
Right.
one-handed. Elves with ears that are extending up to the moon. I don't. That's not for me. That's not
Yeah.
my personal taste. I want to
I'm with you.
see something that I feel like I could be in that world and real physics applied, and that's where I'm going with. But yeah, I would welcome. I'd love to work with anybody on Dragonlance or any of these other projects. I'm a freelancer. I'm always available for work. So hit me up and
Well,
let's talk.
Before we get anywhere else
Mhm.
in this, what's the
Mhm.
best avenue of contact for you if someone is interested?
Well, I mean, you've posted up my my website, my art station, and email works, Mike at MikePerryArt.com. I'm also on Instagram at Mike Perry Art, and those are really the two great ways to get a hold of me, and we can start talking from there.
Well, you also offered the idea of sort of working on a live piece as we're sort of having this conversation. Do you want to
Yeah,
switch
sure,
over and do that?
sure. I will share my screen.
Awesome. Let's see if we can get this working. So everyone here, just bear with us. We're going to see some live art here in just 1 second.
So you let me know when you can see my screen, because I'm just focused. I can only see my screen. You can?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking about DL6 Dragons of Ice. This image here is the only image from my time of Filthas, the Dragon High Lord. And he doesn't look like a Dragon High Lord at all. I mean, it's a wonderful illustration, but I mean, he looks like this weird old Gollum-y guy with a beard and a sharp knife. Like, I'm not scared of this guy at all.
He reminds me of the lead singer of Anthrax.
Yeah.
The shorts.
It's such a shame, right? It's not a real great image of Filthas. So what I was thinking we could do is I could describe my concept process, and then you can act as art director and sort of art direct me as we start to work out his look, his costume, that sort of thing. Right. So it'll be a bit of a collaborative, and we'll have some fun. So what do you think?
Well, first of all, Filthas is an elf. He's a dark elf. He was cast out of Sylvanesty, so he needs to look like an elf, right? So he's not an aged old wizard, but an actual elf.
Exactly. So I'll show you what I've got going on so far. When I do concept art, or characters, I
Oh,
like to start
wow.
with their faces. I like to look at their portrait, and
Yeah.
quite often I go with a well-known, a celebrity, because
Yes.
it helps inform things, right? And also
Yes.
it's that nerd. Let's fan cast these people. So I'm looking at people from the period, the early '80s, when the novels were written,
Great.
and I'm trying to think of what could Filthas look like. He's a High Lord. He's a wizard. He's you know he's got that '80s aesthetic, but he's still evil, and he's really evil. And so this is a run of 8 different portraits. I was thinking, experimenting with hair, ear shape, likenesses. So,
Mhm.
what do you think? This is what we got so
I
far.
mean, I'm gravitating to 1 or 2, but I don't want it to be
Hmm.
too Green Goblin-y.
Okay, okay. Green. Well, that's the problem, because those are Willem Dafoe.
Yep.
That's who I was
Yeah.
thinking. And if you've seen Willem Dafoe from the early '80s, he really has that gaunt look. And there's
Mhm.
there's a movie he was in where he had this. It was like a '80s street biker kind of thing, and he looks really skinny and scary, and he's
Yeah.
the villain in that movie. So I thought that would be a perfect look for him. And then
I like number
this.
6 too. I think that's great.
Hmm.
Well, no,
So
I'm sorry, 7, not 6.
6 and 7. Well, so get this. These are all Bono, from U2,
Oh,
from
yeah.
the early '80s.
Yeah.
And if you look at pictures of him, he has this sort of arrogant vanity look. It's really just, as soon as I was like, I hit on it, I'm like, that looks like Phil Fast to me. Like a really arrogant, vain, cruel. Like I could see him act like that face,
Mhm.
or a variation of it. Like I could build on that. Right. So that's sort
Yeah.
of where I was going. I started to go through this process, and then I ended up with, okay, I kind of like Bono. And
Mhm.
now here's some different hairstyles, or variations of '80s mullets.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so I this is what I
God,
got for
yeah,
that.
for me, I gotta go number 2 or number 7. Those are my 2
Two and
favorite. I think number 7 is great because one thing about Fieldfast that was really extrapolated on in the Dragons of High Lord Skies from the Lost Chronicles was
uh-huh,
that he was calculating.
uh-huh,
He used he took his time to set up situations, and like he was working actively against Kitiara. He was, trying to maintain control of his. Of course, all the High Lords are sort of jockeying for position in Erika's eyes, and so of course
mhm,
he's doing that. But I always, he is an elf, and if you're going to
mhm,
be persuasive, if you're going to be manipulative, you have to either look the part or play the part. And for some
mhm,
reason, from Dragons of High Lord Skies, I saw him as both. I thought he has to be good looking and he has to be really persuasive and intellectual. I think number 7 does that really well. Number 2
mhm,
reminds me of a vile, evil type
mhm,
character. I don't really see that as him
mhm,
necessarily, because he's more interested in just exploring his own experiments, being outcast in Icewall.
mhm,
He's
mhm,
not so much like in Sanction or in Naraka, working with the political machinations as much. He wants to just
mhm.
be left alone until Kitiara starts, flexing her muscles.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Well,
And
I
so
think
which
we're on the
one were
same
you
page.
like 100%
I
on?
kind of like I like 7 as well. I think that one really. I think we're in sync here. So,
Hmm.
I went with that one, or
Nice.
a variation of it, and then so my next step would be preliminaries. And so here's just some preliminary drawings on the
Hmm.
left. Like what would he look like just walking around Icewall? He's kind of playing around with outfit. It's cold. He's wearing some robes, but he's an elf lord,
Yeah.
or he thinks himself as an elf. And then on the right, I'm kind of playing around. Before you do any real working out costume, you always want to work out the anatomy first.
That's what I
So
do too. That's great.
yeah, there you go. So I got all his anatomy going here on the right, and then
I mean, Ken
here's
doll, but yeah.
well,
It's a
here's sort of.
PG-13 show, so yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the anatomy's not drawn in; it's
Yeah.
just hinted here, right? So this is a
We're not
PG-13
going full Clive
demonstration.
Barker here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I went with that likeness that you like, number 7,
Yeah.
or a variation of that. And then this is sort of a pose I like, just static. Perhaps he's holding a dragon orb in his hand, and he's
Nice.
got his sword. And so now this is where we get to start concepting his outfit. What is he wearing? How would you imagine him? And I did some armor reference here, or I gathered some,
Oh, that's great.
because I'm thinking about him and his, the way he, well, in the book. So I've got, DL6 right here, and they have him wearing it says a chainmail +2, but it's white, or it's black, gleaming black armor and a shield. And none of the Dragon High Lords wear chainmail, right? And they seem to be wearing some kind of scale mail made from dragon scales or faux dragon scales.
Right.
And he's a white Dragon High Lord. Why wouldn't he be wearing white? But Verminard's wearing black. I don't know. But I like how some of these on the right, you can see here, just the way these pieces of scale overlap, almost like skin, and how they move over the hands. And on the left, you can see these are references to actual illustrations of Dragon High Lord armor. So that's where my ideas start. And now this is where you come in. I mean, what are you thinking? What would he be wearing? A plate, boots, like this is where, and maybe some of the people watching might have some ideas as well that they want to kick in, and we can just start. This is blank canvas here. Let's just start throwing out some ideas.
Yeah. Well, in the chat, let us know your thoughts on this. And what do you think Filthaz looked like? So let's examine the character, because he was a wizard. At least he was a wizard in High Lord Skies. I don't recall like looking at his stats in DL6, to be honest. And so the idea of robes for wizards, and not to mention also just loose fitting clothing in elves in general, is just in my head sort of a natural thing. So if he was wearing scale mail, I mean, I don't know if it's maybe a scale mail robe, like layers and maybe cinched together with a belt or something. So it's a little mixture between the two, or if he's got a layer of scale mail underneath his robes. I do like the idea of having a sort of like an enclosure, like he could easily take the outer garment off and just have whatever underneath.
Well, I'm thinking, I've seen some really interesting scale mail where, he's wearing his robes, right? But then it almost acts like a chainmail type shirt, right? So I'm just kind of roughing it in as we go. But then, you have your belt line, and then this whole area here is scales. Right? So it's, he has a skirt. Yeah, you got to protect the, the lower area, but he still has the robes of the black, and, would he, he's a fighter mage, so he's going to want to move. Robes get in the way, and it's cold. So I'm thinking he would probably wear some kind of glove, would he have long gloves, short gloves? This is what we're doing, and we can do as many variations as we have time. This is like a paper doll exercise. And you look at the other. Do the High Lords all have capes? Would he have a cape? He's hanging out in Ice Wall.
I mean, you look at Verminard's cape right there. That's straight up like a Thanoi fur or like a polar bear fur.
Yeah. Like, would he look pretty cool? Like almost like some sort of lion. Like I find Verminard's cape. Look at that. So I'm going to turn the reference off just because it's a little clearer for everybody to watch.
So Injun Joe says something interesting. Put a Thanoi skull somewhere on his armor or belongings.
A Thanoi. Oh, what if we took the Thanoi tusk and made it like some kind of...
It could be like a shoulder piece, like
yeah. Well, there's so many ways we could go with it. What if we did it like he had several Thanoi tusks making a shoulder pad, kind of strapped together like that. Right.
That'd be pretty cool. I mean, you could even go like claws or something, like the walrus. Like the walrus tusks are huge. Like these are monstrous beings, like 8 feet or something. I mean, a walrus is monstrous. So you could just, I don't know, having multiples together might be overkill just in weight and sort of functionality. I do like the idea that you started with just having them sort of draping down on the sides over his chest. That's like a bold statement. Like, look, you're going to end up here if you don't do what I say.
Yeah. Well, let's do another one, right? So maybe, I mean, do we want him to look too tribal though? Like, there's that, you kind of fall down that line. Like Dragon High Lords, they still have that aesthetic, right? Yeah. Like, so we can just do as many variations as we want, right? But I'm just going to duplicate this layer here, and then move it over. And so turn this off here. So we can just draw, I'm going to just draw right on top of it.
So Chris is saying he likes the scale mill a bit with some kind of fur for Filthaz maybe.
Well, what if he had something like the fur? Well, I don't know. We can go Game of Thrones, right? They always have those big, huge fur and the big cross, and the fur goes up that way. Yeah, he's all So what we're going to do right now is like we're just blocking in shapes,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
We're just figuring out what looks good, what doesn't. And then, if we're going to have something like that, then those big long capes they always had in that series, would that work for him? And then what would we see for his scale mail? Would he have anything else? Do you see him in white robes or white armor? What do you think about that?
The thing with dark elves in general is that they're always
Mm-hmm.
portrayed as having longing for their home. Fieldfaz had that, but
Mm-hmm.
there's something about his acceptance and embracing of his
Mm-hmm.
being ostracized to the ice wall. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
he would probably drape himself like those fantasy ice queens would, the blues and the
Mm-hmm.
whites, and just sort of play
Mm-hmm.
with that sort of color palette.
Huh, fantasy ice queen like Elsa from Frozen.
I was not thinking that.
No, that might be good. That might be good. Let's
Do you
give
guys
him.
want to build a snowman?
Yeah,
Anyone?
let's give him a big long braid. Let's give him a braid. Why not?
Oh, you're
And
killing me.
some kind of, do you want to build this? Give him that. But I mean,
I
that
mean, you
doesn't
can
look.
totally have
That
a braid
doesn't
as an
look.
elf, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't look too.
No, that doesn't look bad at all.
Too.
As long as it's not cornrows into a braid,
Okay,
that might be a
no
little weird.
cornrows. That's it. No cornrows. But would he wear like? I get the impression, although he resents the Sylvanesty, right? But he's a High Lord now. Like
Yeah.
maybe he would want to show off some outward symbols of lordship. Like when I think of a lord, some kind of crown or some sort of tiara or something. Does
I
that?
dig that.
What does that look like
Thing
to
is, like,
you? Or
the
would he?
Dragon High Lord helmets
Mhm,
are iconic and they're great and they're practical. I
mhm,
mean, you have to protect your face as you're soaring through the skies at
mhm,
insane elevations. Um,
mhm.
He's a wizard, though. Like, he could
Yeah.
probably cast a spell of protection, so he has a little bit more ability to stylize his helmet. I
Mhm,
like the idea of a crown, but that might be a little ostentatious when he has to travel back to Naraka and stand in front of Erika's.
mhm,
What are you trying to usurp me? You got your own crown or something? So maybe it's
mhm.
like a helmet, but maybe it's open faced rather than closed face.
Okay.
Maybe that's where he plays with the walrus tusks too.
Okay.
Like the
Okay.
idea of sort of using the horns instead of going traditionally out and up. Maybe it
Mhm.
comes out and down, or I don't know. You don't want to be too like,
Well, sticking out of the sides, like what's
yeah, I
one
don't know.
trope I do find with
That is very
80s.
Brahm right there.
Yeah, like with 80s Dragonlance stuff, they all have horns in their helmets, right?
Yeah.
Which would just get hooked on everything. And try walking through a door with this type of armor, and it would never happen, right? Uh, so I like what you're saying about the open face. I would like when you think of elves, they've got those ears. How would you wear a helmet with ears?
Yeah.
And if you did,
It's gotta be like a skull
if you
cap or something, maybe.
yeah, if you well, that's a good idea. Yeah. What if like the skull cap from that do you remember Excalibur
I
from
love me some Excalibur. Oh,
yeah,
let's
yeah.
not get started on Excalibur because we'll be here
Well,
all day.
let's start with a Merlin kind of, it had
Great.
that neck
Yeah.
protection piece, right? And
Nice. Summon the
maybe he
dragon.
wouldn't have a Thanoi tusk on it, but maybe he'd have something carved into it, like
Yeah, I love the idea of
Thanoi.
etchings. I mean, he's
Yeah,
a black robe wizard, right?
yeah,
Like there
yeah.
has to be some sort of arcane symbology. Maybe even like when Nuitari is in its full sanction, like the runes light up and only
Uh-huh.
under the Nuitari's glow. I mean, maybe it's something kind
Yeah.
of
Well, I'm thinking here, like, three moons, right? We've got, the light moon, the dark moon, or the red moon, and then the dark moon here, Solinari, Nuitari, Lunitari.
yeah.
Maybe he could have something like that. Maybe something, comes down a bit more. I always like how some armor, really frames the face. I know it looks
Yeah.
very Roman, but, what if we did something or tie them together and there's just a hole for the ears? So it's a skull cap with holes, right?
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. That's great.
Yeah, something little. We're getting more High Lordy. I'm feeling it, with the shapes here, because everything that the High Lords had were kind of spiky and big plates,
Yeah.
giant shoulder pads. That was a thing. They loved the huge shoulder pads.
That's pretty much the 80s.
Yeah, and
That's how we
it
roll.
doesn't. I know. So, you want to keep. I think about it, right? Do I want to keep them or not? Like, we can
Thing
play
is,
with it,
they
right?
could be used as a sort of a guard for the cloak, not to get all up in your front business, just to sort of
Mm-hmm.
keep it in the back.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the shoulder blades sort of come up in order to make sure that the cloak falls behind him rather than drapes over his shoulder or something. Really quick,
So with
LARP
Mhm,
Engine Joe, thanks you guys so much for joining. LARP is saying gold, silver inlay possibly. I like that idea.
mhm, okay. Well, that's very in keeping with the
Yeah.
themes that they would have, right? Some kind of pad. What if he had what if he had a robe, kind of like a toga sort of thing, right?
Interesting.
Coming off the back.
Right.
So we've got this toga of the black robe. I'll
Yeah.
just use a bigger brush here. So we got this black robe coming off him and wrapping around him, you have that majestic, he's a wizard warrior, little Roman, we got a little bit of
Maybe
that going on
like
here.
a two-color duotone or something like the
hmm
robe stripe across his chest is a different color than the base garment underneath it.
Some kind of symbol of office for the High
Yeah.
Lords, like maybe some kind of something here, right? Something that
Some sort of
only
epaulette or
only a
pannier.
wizard of Takissus and would have. I'm not sure, but we still have the shoulder pad, so that's very Dragon High Lord,
Mhm.
and we need some SCML. A lot of them too have big girdles. Have you noticed? They really have girdles. They
I
love the girdle.
have not noticed the girdle.
Anybody else there in
How many people are fans of
YouTube?
girdles? Raise your hand.
Yeah. Anyone else pick up on the girdle thing? That was very popular. Katara has hers with the leopard print on it. What if he had something
Get
with
out of
wolf
here.
fur?
What? Am I missing artwork? I don't. That's
You haven't seen?
no.
Here, I'll show
That's
you.
hilarious.
Armor. Right there. See it?
I can't believe I've never noticed the leopard print.
Oh yeah, she's got the leopard print, right there.
What the hell is happening in my life that I missed?
She's got the leopard print and she's got the girdle. We've got the gold inlay and that big circle belt.
Oh my gosh.
Buckle.
This is a whole new
Verminard's
aspect of life for me.
I found when I read Chronicles recently, just how Verminard talked about how stuffy his helmet was and he was locked in.
Yeah.
And then when I look at this costume, he's got that cloth covering his face.
Yeah,
So
the little chainmail like over his
I-
mouth.
Yeah, I'm like, well, is that chainmail or is that fabric? What is that? And then how does that make it stuffy for
Maybe
him?
he has allergies and it's just a hanky.
Well, he is. I don't want him to look too barbarian. This is looking a little barbarian, right?
You're right.
Maybe he would have, because I think in the tales they say he can manipulate wolves and control ice wolves. I think they talk about that with Vilthas. Anybody? I think
Right. Yeah, he did.
that's one of his powers, right?
Yeah.
So maybe something wolfish. What would be wolfish that we
that's
could add to that?
I mean, you could play with just, instead like having like a paw claws where like the back of the glove or the gauntlet thing is like just fur. Maybe even like the claws are built into the gauntlet, not quite Freddy Krueger like, but just as like a a cool little method, like on the outside of it.
What if we went something like Thundercats? Lion-O had his big,
hell yeah, dude.
his big,
You can tell we're from the same generation.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
these
for
references.
sure. This is great. But what if he had instead of him holding the dragon orb in his hand, he's got like one claw, one big old claw sort of hand. Like maybe it's a polar bear paw for a hand. He's wearing that, and as a
That's
gauntlet.
his Nintendo
or
Power Glove.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
It's the claw glove.
Maybe this wasn't going to work. I don't know, but this is fun. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe you're spitballing here, but what works, what doesn't? Keep them coming. Keep the ideas. Does he have boots up to here? Because he's interested in like pirate
I don't know.
boots?
I do like honestly. I imagine him very much being like once you mentioned the Game of Thrones, very much sort of that sort of Stark or even like Watchers of the Wall, where they have to be super bundled up in layers. I like the idea of him wearing like whether it's a skin tight sort of scale mail or something underneath, and that you can maybe see through like a neckline of outer layer robes. But the idea of him having multiple robe layers, like maybe this one right here is the second layer, not the skin layer. And then on the outside of that, you even have an even larger sort of, maybe it is a one-sided cape or where it sort of drapes over one shoulder, that back shoulder with the sword. And, it comes up around that sort of that shoulder, the shoulder guard right there that is on the oh, what that would be his left shoulder, and it
Hmm.
drapes down even further. But I like the idea of the gauntlet, maybe not like a full girdle, but like a thick robe sort of wrapping around his waist, sort of
Hmm.
containing the inner layers in, just sort of maintain that layer of heat for himself.
Like a kind of like what Roslin's robe looks like in the the covers, right? Like
Oh.
he's got some kind of robe. Maybe that, like a lot of the robes that the artists at the time, how they drew the characters is very similar. Like all like Fizbin's robes look like Raslin's robes, look
Mm-hmm.
like Palin's robes, that sort of thing, right?
Right.
So maybe he's got robes and they bunch up at his elbows, right?
Yeah.
And then we have a gauntlet or something
Yeah, he
here.
wants freedom of movement. He doesn't want his robe getting in the
Yeah.
way.
Well, he needs to use his fingers and spell components to cast, so he's got to have some protection, but
Mm-hmm.
minimal protection. What if he's got some kind of above the robe? Then he has a vest of scale mail. Maybe that's it. So it's just sleeves that we're seeing,
Right.
some kind of
No, that's
thing
interesting.
like
Yeah.
that. Some kind of something like that. A little bit, covers the bicep, but not too much.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be very ornate? Sorry, would he have straps? And I mean, I don't.
Yeah, you got to
Less
think
is
about
more,
the
right?
process of putting it on. I mean, does he have a
Mm-hmm.
helper to help him put this stuff on, or it has to be
Mm-hmm.
simple enough for him to slip it on and off because he
Mm-hmm.
lives such an isolated existence?
What if he had fur boots? Some kind of
I
fur.
feel like just
Would he?
practically you have to, right? Maybe it's
Well,
even walrus hide. Like it's got to be like thick
ooh.
and blubbery, like massive boots.
What if it was walrus hide, but it had been, treated or something, so it doesn't have that
Right, tanned
shaggy
or
hide.
something.
But they're bulkier, like a
The
big
idea of
pair of.
like alligator. I would never, be a supporter of it, but the idea of like alligator boots or something like that,
Mhm.
where it's like, clearly you don't have the thickness of the fat layer that alligators have on the inside of their scale, but it's just that
Mhm.
you just see the texture on the outside. It's been treated or tanned or something.
Yeah, we definitely would sell with that kind of thing. They'd be big and warm, over boots almost. So
Mm,
maybe he would wear layers. I think about the ice wall castle, and I mean, is it made of ice? Is it made of stone? I think it was a pre-cataclysm castle that was stranded there. So, but the ice, it's on a glacier now. So,
right, right,
there'd
right.
be a bit of both. And
Yeah, the
what would it
ice
be
would have
like to
creeped
live
for
there?
sure. I do
Yeah.
like I honestly imagine it like the wall in the north of
Okay.
Westeros. Like that. It's got to be like a structure was originally built, but the
Mm-hmm.
elements are creeping
Mm-hmm.
in on it. So he
Mm-hmm.
has to have stone architecture in some cases, maybe even because elves are so great with shaping their
Mm-hmm.
environments. I mean, they live in forests, and so they use trees and granite and stuff like that. They use rock.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he
Mm-hmm.
did that with the ice wall. So maybe he it's a mixture. It's a conglomerate of ice and stone.
A conglomerate of ice and stone. I never thought of him for manipulating it. I thought of him as he just moved in. He's the latest tenant.
Hmm.
Yeah, and he just, how would he live there? Would he have, dead animals on the ground as his rugs, or would it actually have rugs that he brought in? Because in the books they refer to the other High Lords really enjoying the finer things, right, and the
Hmm.
plunder. So maybe during his, his campaigns, he's plundered and brought rich, lavish rugs, and then you'd have that contrast. Like, so when you watch Game of Thrones, and we want to be careful not to be too over influenced by that other IP, because we're making something new here, right?
Right. Right.
But they have a lot of language. They've broken a lot of ground here.
Hmm.
But the wall is just stark. There's nothing. It's so stark. There's nothing going on there. It's just wood, ice, stone, fur
Yeah,
coats.
especially to an elven sensibility.
Yeah, so maybe he would be this. This stinks. I don't like this. Let's give him some big baggy sleeves, maybe. But maybe he would. The contrast, if you have this stark, terrible environment, yet you have a beautiful, colorful rug.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
there's got to be a reason why does he want to live in uncomfortable gray
The thing
worlds
is,
in the end?
again, he's a
Hmm.
dark elf, and so he
Hmm.
reflects fondly on the
Hmm.
lifestyle that he was banished from in Sylvanesti for choosing
Hmm.
the black robes. So he must have that sensibility of wanting to embrace nature, but also the finer things in life.
Hmm.
I always imagine the Savannesty and Quillennesty really, shaping like pottery and, having
Hmm.
wonderful sculptures, on table stands. And like, I just imagine them sort of enjoying the artistic side of life infinitely more. So if you just moved into this existing ice palace or ice castle or something, and you're a dark elf, I do imagine him shaping that surrounding, like filling it with creature comforts that are familiar and
Hmm.
happy. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
sure he's got a winery somewhere that he,
Oh yeah, yeah.
artificially keeps at the right temperature. And
I have a friend who's an ice sculptor, and I follow him quite a bit on social media, and I just occurred to me, he makes what he makes and why. Like maybe that instead of manipulating nature in the sense of growing trees or gardens, he is shaping the ice.
Mhm.
What if he's carving, his victories out of ice using his magic on the walls?
Oh,
That'd be
that's
kind of
cool.
cool, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's like a fireplace that doesn't only gives off warmth, but for some magical reason it doesn't melt the ice. So maybe it's encrusted in some sort of dragon battle. That would be pretty neat,
That
right?
would be
Or
very cool. Yeah.
this. I mean, I haven't gotten to the point where I'm designing the world that they're in, but I'm liking where this is going.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the riffing process. It really informs
Well, yeah, that's what I'm
me.
saying. Like
Yeah.
you had mentioned, you alerted earlier, like we need to understand how people live in order to understand
Mhm.
why they look the way they do, because that informs
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
I do like the idea of him embracing his exile in this place. He needs to project a sense of, I belong here to the residents. Like
Hmm.
we have the ice folk, we have the Thanoi, we have the polar bear population down here. He needs to project the sense of, look, I'm an outsider, but this is my home now. And
Hmm.
you will do what I say or suffer the
Hmm.
consequences, because I am the High Lord. I am High Lord
Hmm.
Filthaz. I'm the only High Lord with a
Hmm.
dragon orb.
Hmm.
That's huge. Like, no
That
one
is
ever
huge.
talks about that.
And that yes, I that's why I think it's important to show him with that. Like
Mhm.
as a character, it's a shame because in the game, I mean, he was powerful, and if you go through his stats, his strength is 1830 something. Like he's really strong for
Jeez.
an elf, right? And Lord Soth is 1800, right? Strength. So
Mhm.
there's not very many characters are in the high 18s, right? Especially in elf. So he's
Yeah.
got some power to him, and when
Especially
he
in Elf.
hits
They
you,
shouldn't be able
it,
to.
yeah, when he hits you hard. And I'm thinking about, in the story too, they just one of the stories in the tales, it describes how and in the game too, they talk about he waits in his treasure room with after taking drinking a potion of invisibility, and he gets the first attack, and he hits one of the knights with a lightning bolt or something and
Mhm.
kills them. So he's powerful, he's threatening, he's not just some lackey like Toady, right?
Yeah.
He's a real intimidating character, and he's a force to reckon with. And how do we capture that and be scared as a player, as an audience? I want to be scared of this guy, and I want to convey that power, but make him make him elvish, make him Sylvanesty, but unique, like some kind of hybrid with the High Lords.
Yeah.
These are what I'm going with. Maybe the robes I'm finding with the armor. As you can see here, I'm giving him tighter gloves.
Mhm.
They're very form fitting, so he still has lots of dexterity, but they protect his
He
hands
needs that for
somehow.
sure.
Yeah, and then maybe he's got puffy sleeves because you want baggy clothes in winter scenarios to insulate you, and
Mhm.
it's also very wizard like. But he's going to have his basic armor, his basic in the module they describe it as he's wearing chainmail, right?
Mhm.
So let's say he's got a chainmail harness going on here. Just
Right.
that's it. It's simple. He's in the ice wall. There's not a lot of people to stand up to
He's not
him
trying to
on the
impress
ice wall.
anyone.
Yeah, and I don't like the people of the ice wall, the locals, they're not really a threat to him at all. He's almost, he wears armor just I think out of like I think of the heroes came into the
Mhm.
castle and he's like, oh, I better put my armor on. So he just threw his chainmail on. Maybe
Right.
that's what's going on. But then maybe he wears we've got the robe, so let's combine that robe. I like that robe and shoulder pad idea.
So
So
Horrific
maybe
Podcast is saying,
Mhm,
oh, sorry, I got a notification that covered it. Draw
mhm.
inspiration from Drukhari in 40K. I don't know that reference. Do you?
No, 40K, that's Warhammer, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Warhammer 40K. No, I don't know the reference, but
This
I'll
feels
have to
very
look it up.
senatorial.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's riff on that, But let's give him. What if he's got some kind of big scarf, right, or some kind of something
Oh,
to
that's
keep his neck
interesting. I
warm?
kind of like
Yeah,
that idea
yeah. What if he's got
because
something
that's a
like this?
huge heat saver.
Yeah, yeah. I
Sort
mean,
of traps it in.
you would think elves would be prone to frostbite in the north, right?
Oh, for
Because their ears are
sure.
exposed,
I mean,
right?
they're
So
used to the forests. I
yeah.
mean,
So he would have to do that, but we don't want to give him earmuffs because that's just not
that
very
would be.
heroic. But some kind of thing. What if we have a wolf symbol here?
Mhm.
Because he can turn into wolves.
Yeah.
I'm just,
I dig it.
knocking out forms, right? Yeah. Let's go with that. Would he wear something on his head? The helmet.
I feel like he has to have something on his head. Maybe
hmm
only when he's taking flight, with the dragon.
Yeah. Well, okay. I like that too. He would have. So let's go with the version 7 we liked of the hair. So it's kind of long, slicked back. That
Yeah,
sort
I
of
mean, when
thing.
he's home, I don't. Maybe he has a circlet, that sort of goes around and holds his hair down in the back or something. But
Okay.
I can't imagine like a full normal, day
Uh-huh.
wear helmet.
Let's say it's made out of some kind of.
Engine Joe is insistent. There must be a Sathanoi skull somewhere.
There must be a Thanos. Okay. Did you see the Thanoi that I did? I had done a drawing of one. I think
Let's
I sent
show
it
it
in
to
that
everyone
package.
watching. I don't know that we cycled through all the images while we were talking that you sent.
Right. So we keep with the girdle. Are you showing it right now? Or?
No, I'm not. I'm just watching.
okay.
You draw. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
going to go away from
You're
what
not
you're
gonna-
doing right here.
Oh,
and
okay,
here's
sure.
something I wanted to bring up because normally
Mhm.
interviews that I do are around an hour. We're 11
We're
over
over
an
that?
hour right now. How long are you comfortable going before we should sort of taper this off?
I got all day.
Yeah.
It's up to you, and
Well, I'm
what
good.
your time is, and
Yeah,
as
let's
long as
not
you're
go over
enjoying
2
yourself,
hours. But
yeah, as long as you're enjoying yourself and your followers,
yeah.
are getting something out of this, then let's keep it going and have some fun.
So here's something
anyone's-
that I do as a graphic designer that I think most artists do this as well, but it just sort of struck me. So don't manipulate this picture at all. But everyone watching this, turn your head away from the screen, focus your eyes on something in the distance, and then look back at what he has on screen. It looks fucking great. Like you get a new perspective when you stop looking at it first. And another thing is obviously, scaling it and, walking away from it and looking at a different perspective. No, I mean, but it helps you like look at the image. You get so close to it and so involved when you're working on it. It's nice to step away from it and then come back to it. And when you do that, you see it in a different light. Sometimes it's not good. Sometimes it's great. In this particular case, I think it's great. But I like where you're going with this. Oh, especially that texture you sort of painting in. That's great.
Yeah, I'm just knocking in some chainmail rings, right? Just, it gives a bit of texture. It shows us what's going on. And
the thing is, he must be arrogant, right? I mean, he's a dragon high lord. Yes, he was outcast from Sylvanesty, but he owned that. He's a black robed wizard. He has a dragon orb. He has a dragon. He is in control of the largest landmass that any dragon high lord has ever been in control of. Yeah, it's mostly desolate, but still, it's like open tundra, but still, like,
well, let's push up his vanity then.
Yeah.
What ways can we make him look more vain, more powerful, more to go with what you were just saying? What are your ideas on that one? Like more. It's almost like in direct contrast to the stark nature of his domain.
Right.
Like it's a bleak domain. It's snow and it's sparsely populated.
Well, I wonder if the natives of this region, if they have some sort of like jewelry decoration, like what's their natural decoration, and how can you then take that and add a sort of garish elven sensibility on top of it? Is it like I don't know. Is it like links, like chain links around their neck that sort of hang, and then he extrapolated out gems, or maybe it's, claws or teeth or something on top of that to sort of marry this idea of visceral, sort of aggression with, beauty and stark, just
Hmm.
dazzle. I mean, is it something where instead of even doing decoration style, maybe it's just an outfit where, like when you look at people from a distance, you're getting silhouettes more than anything else. What's
Hmm.
the silhouette of Fields as to project that sense of like ostentatious, power?
Hmm.
I mean, Dragon High Lords naturally do it with their helmet and the armor pads and the shoulders, from a distance.
Hmm.
So maybe he takes that, but he changes it up in a way. So maybe instead of having a helmet create that sort of horn on the top, maybe it's extending from like his actual armor back piece. Like maybe that's where he has the walrus tusks coming out from the back piece, and it's sort of framing the outside of his back.
So,
Did
like a
you ever see
walrus
13th Warrior?
a long
Like
time
there are
ago,
these
long
bear
time ago.
creatures in that. There's sort of a riff on the Gilgamesh story in the second half of that film.
Hmm.
But they use these long tusks as sort of a silhouette. Yeah, kind of like that,
Hmm.
where it just sort of came up from the back. And that's just a way of him sort of projecting this sense of larger than life.
Would he? So what if he had a big,
Oh, I
plate
see what you're doing.
shoulder pad? But well, this is what it would look like. So it would
Yeah, I don't
attach
know.
to his
Maybe
shoulder
that's
pad, or did they?
So I was thinking more of like it's like a harness. Maybe it's part of the girdle that like just extends up in this plate piece on his back to keep his back rigid when he's flying, and that's where the horns come. Oh shit! Sorry, I just hit my mic there.
What if
It's like
what
jutting
if
up
he
from
did
behind or something.
something like remember Mad Max
Yeah,
Thunderdome,
yeah.
and the guy, what was the guy he had that, it was like a skull on the, like some kind of harness, right? What if he on his back, something like that? This could be made out of the bones of Thanoi, and maybe this is a Thanoi skull here,
Dude, that's
right
primitive.
off
Yeah.
right off that. I mean, it's pretty savage, but what if it was something like that? I'm trying to think of how would I don't know if that was working, but how would those spikes work? Because they would effectively be spikes if they
Yeah.
were coming off of him. What if he instead had the sword is made, the ivory is carved Thanoi tusk, right? What if it's some kind of, interesting sword here? This is all
Like
ivory,
the hilt or something.
right? But say it doesn't, it's one of those, some like a Japanese katana sometimes
Yeah.
doesn't have a suba on it, the
Yeah.
cross guard. So it would be say a shorter blade,
Oh, that's kind
but
of cool. Just
but
one
made
edge
out
is
of,
honed.
yeah, but the handle is like one long tang. So this would be the tang, and then the blade, the whole hilt would just be a Thanoi uh, thing. But aren't the Thanoi his allies? Doesn't he, like, he's their boss? So
Yeah,
how
he's in
would they
charge of them.
respond if he was wearing their carcass as his?
I mean, it goes to
You know?
you bring up
Yeah.
a good point. It goes to
Uh-huh.
the intimidation factor, right? So
Mhm, mhm,
if it was us trying to convince a populace to follow us, we would be like, hey, I can
mhm,
identify with your problems and I can help your problems. And very political. I always imagine High Lords being like, you don't choose to work with me, you
mhm,
must work with me. So it's a position
mhm,
of command. It's a position of power. Like I
mhm,
slayed your greatest leader. It's very
mhm,
prison yard. You go to prison, you
mhm,
hit the biggest guy there, and you make a name for yourself. He goes there,
mhm,
he finds their champion, and he decimates the champion, and that's why he's wearing the champion's X. Whatever that
mhm,
X is.
mhm.
And so
I like
that's
that.
sort of
Yeah.
where I'm coming from when it comes to that.
Maybe he gained control of the Thanoi tribe because he destroyed their leader, right?
Mhm.
Something like that. Something, and we've
Thing
got
is,
the
like,
robes going.
walrus skin isn't great. It
Mhm.
doesn't look good. It's not aesthetic. I
Uh-huh.
can't imagine an elf being like, I want to tan this and wear this. We were playing around
Mhm.
with the idea before, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I don't know. What of a
Mhm.
walrus would you actually want to showcase? Definitely not
Mhm.
the gross, hairy muzzle. They're not pleasant looking creatures. I mean, they're cute, but they're not like, I want to
Uh-huh.
wear this and look badass. So the only thing that you could really use from the Thanoi would be their tusks that would look
Mm-hmm.
badass. But then how badass does that actually look to other Thanoi? You know, if they're the ones wearing it, they're just like, that's Tuesday. What, that doesn't mean anything to me. I don't care. So that's not very intimidating to Thanoi. So
Well, yeah,
maybe it is something different.
when I drew the Thanoi, when I was thinking about them, I mean, some of the other illustrations had shown them with weapons and wearing a little bit of clothing and armor, and that just didn't make sense to me as a creature that swims. It's a polar creature that swims, and they're barely intelligent. They're very tribal, and they've got these giant paws with claws. Anyways, why would they need an axe?
Yeah.
Right? Why would they need anything?
Right.
And they would be terrifying coming out of the ocean, just coming at you, right?
Just
And they would,
hordes, yeah.
yeah, and like I don't know if you've ever been around large sea mammals, but one time I was out at deep sea
I had a
fishing, and
girlfriend once, but no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
one time I was out deep sea fishing on the Pacific coast, and we went to this rock, and it was covered in sea lions, but like the really really big ones, I think, and they're smaller than walrus. But these things would have swamped our boat if one of them even hit the boat or came into
Whoa.
the boat. And they were swimming under it and around it, and it was, you know, the power of these things is not lost on me. So I think of these creatures. Let's imagine they were created by the Grey Gem, right?
Yeah.
And they're basically just walrus men.
Mhm.
That's it. So and that's all they need to be, and they're scary enough just like that. They wouldn't have anything else, and you know, that's where I'm going with with the Thanoi, and
Right.
using them almost as giant shock troops, just crushing through any opposition. That's terrifying enough, like giant trolls, you know, if you use the Lord of the Rings sort of
Right.
comparison. But because you're talking about the ice people, I haven't shown you this, but I broke some ground on what maybe the ice people looked like.
Oh,
So
nice.
we can just take a quick segue over here. But and this might influence where we're going with the design of Filthas,
That's
right?
great.
So here's Harold and Ragart, what I was thinking for these guys. Although Harold is supposed to be 7 feet tall, 300-pound, wearing a frost reaver. He's got horns on his helmet, wearing, you know, the fur of a bear or something going on here. I just thought this is what I'm thinking of. These are my initial thoughts.
Great.
And then Ragart, I'm thinking in the description, they describe him as extremely old and shrouded in white fur, and that's not very interesting to me. I'm thinking of him as he's still a fighter, like he still has a mace and a shield and fights, and he's not geriatric. He's just a guy in his late 50s, you know. But he's this.
It's like old
he is,
warrior, not so much like old
yeah,
feeble
yeah.
person in Florida.
I don't imagine anybody on Icewall would be a wuss.
Yeah,
I would think anyone
no
who
way.
lived out there would be tough,
Hardened.
just by nature.
Leathery skin.
Yeah,
From the
for
cold
sure.
wind.
Yeah, and then here I'm thinking, well, what would the villagers look like? The people, the everyday people, because you know, in fantasy, that's one thing we always see are just the heroes and the fighters, but we never really see the world that they're protecting and the people and the reason, which is essentially their motivation for doing whatever they do, is their community, right? And this guy on the right, he could probably fight some Thanoi but he's probably just a fisherman, and that's what he does all the time, or a hunter, you know. And this could be his family, you know, his grandma or his mom and his kids and his wife and that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking along the lines of kind of Northern European, you know, medieval clothing, you know, because if you look at the cues from the cover of Dragons of Ice, they're wearing woven fabrics, and they have swords and helmets, so they have some kind of technology. They're not simply Stone Age people living on the ice. I'm thinking maybe they were people who lived there before the cataclysm, and that's all that's left. And maybe because if they have these ice ships, they can travel vast distances. They're probably great traders. They probably trade with people all over the place, and it's such a vast area. So I'm thinking their culture could be really, really neat, really, really unique, and have all kinds of different. There's a lot of places where we could go with that.
Yeah, not very dissimilar from like Scandinavian or, you know, even, you know, like Northern Russian sort of garb from, you know, your 15th century and before. You know, the realities of the environment force you to dress specific ways, but then you want to decorate those fabrics and, you know, sort of with your own culture and stuff. I do always kind of go back to the idea of, you know, he is part of a military organization. You know, he's
Feel
in
f-
the dragon armies.
Yep, we'll go back
So
to this guy.
he
Yeah.
has to not just dress like the natives due to practicalities of it, but he
Mm-hmm.
has to also enhance that with the sensibilities of the dragon army. I can't imagine, you know, showing up at one of their I don't know, chamber meetings or something
Mm-hmm.
where, you know, he comes out looking like a native of
Mm-hmm.
Icewall, and everyone would
Mm-hmm.
just be like okay with it. They'd be probably talking shit like, why are you adopting their clothing? You're supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
subjugating them. You're not supposed to be one
Mm-hmm.
of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you've got to sort of look the role of Dragon
Mm-hmm.
High Lord. So we do have to kind of keep that silhouette intact. You know, we had
Mm-hmm.
those shoulder pads. We had, you know, some form of a helmet to sort of showcase that this is a Dragon High Lord, not just
Mm-hmm.
a local king or something.
Yeah, you're right. I never even, it never occurred to me that he would interact positively or even at all with the people of his region except to enslave them. I
Right.
don't imagine him saying, okay, turn in your rents. I imagine him
Yeah.
just wipe it all out and this is all mine. And he maybe keeps a couple to be slaves around the ice wall. I never even thought of him as trying to be like, I think of the High Lords as their own people's only purpose is to serve them, and
Mhm.
that's it.
Yeah.
Pure evil, right?
Yeah.
So how would we, like in this version here, I like keeping the robe, so we've got some kind of ankle length or long, something to hint that he's got his magic user past,
Mhm.
right? And we could maybe have that toga robe going over his shoulder here, but then instead of a belt, what if he had a baldric to hang his sword, which would be a
I
little
like that.
more, yeah, a little more easy to use, especially when you have bulky clothing.
Yeah.
You don't want to have all these belts that you got to buckle on with your mitts on and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So maybe some kind of that, and we need more. I think we're getting stuck on symbols of office.
Yeah.
How do we express his rank and his title through his clothing, through his appearance?
Mhm.
Does anybody in the chat have any ideas that they
I mean,
might
you
have?
know,
Any?
Horrific
Mhm.
Podcast is asking about Ulish warriors. I'm not familiar with that reference.
Mhm.
Let's see. Icewall could not be kind to people with arthritis. That's true.
Mhm.
It probably wouldn't.
Nope,
um,
nope.
uh, let's see. Chamois to deer hides is what buffalo he's worked with. I'm trying to just like scan through.
Mhm,
What if he
mhm,
had bone on his greaves?
mhm,
Bones on his greaves, or maybe the greaves themselves are made out of bones, or maybe it's
mhm,
just strapped to his boots or something.
mhm,
Um, let's see. You got a thumbs up for the Mad Max Thunderdome idea with the skull.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, you sort of just go wherever. Let's see, silk damask for the robes and headgear. Silk damask. Okay, I'm an idiot. I don't know what damask means. I have to
Um,
Google this to
I
understand
think
what
it's
this.
a type of pattern, maybe, or a fabric
Oh, is it?
type. This
Yeah.
is really, we're getting, it's causing us some hangups. So what I'm thinking, let's go in a different direction.
Okay.
Let's draw him as a full-on High Lord. Let's go like he is at Naraka having a chat with everybody else,
Yeah.
and he's going to fit in with these guys. So let's just go with that, because we're trying to go. We're struggling here.
Yeah.
So this is what we do. Sometimes you hit a wall. You just go back to what you do know, and we'll work backwards. I don't see him being sleeveless, because that's just not going to go.
Yeah.
Right. But these big gloves that Katara has here, and if I mispronounce everyone's names,
Do your
that's
thing.
just how
Who
I do it.
cares? Yeah.
I used to have an ongoing debate with another kid in my school about the proper way to pronounce Carmen and Raslin.
Oh,
He's like, it's
really?
Caramon and Raceland. And I'm like, I don't see it that way. And I feel like the Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman they use too many vowels in their names and places. So anyways, let's see. Let's give them. So Katara sometimes has like she's got a forearm plate, but it's underneath her glove, so she pulls her gloves on and off. So I
Right.
guess so.
Interesting.
Maybe that makes sense practically, because like, let's say you want to take your gloves off, but you don't want to take your whole piece of armor off. You would do that.
So is it
So
just like
let's.
a greave on her forearm?
I don't know what that's. The armor that they use is kind of made up.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of
Well,
their pieces. So, you know, it wouldn't be. Well, what if we use something more realistic? Let's say he'll have like an elbow plate.
I kind of
right?
like that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, some kind of elbow plate like that, and then it connects to. Let's just follow along. So
Yeah.
if you look, you know, contemporary or sorry, other medieval armor, they would have some kind of plate going up here, this area, some sort of plating
Bazoo
with
bands
strap.
for the arms, Larp Beard says.
What are they for the arm? Zazu bands?
Bazoo bands? I don't know what
I have
that
no
means.
idea what that is. Okay, well, I appreciate your input, but I don't know what that means. So let's give them. Would he have
Assume we're
scales
idiots
like
and we
her?
don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I have no idea. I
'Cause I don't know.
Well,
I mean, it looks
she.
like just
Yeah.
like a forearm, like a greave, like a
Yeah.
bracer is not a greave, a bracer.
Right. Well, she has plates, these overlapping scales going
Yeah.
up her whole shoulder. So you'd have that silhouette of kind of a spikiness,
Mhm.
and then they always have the big, like
Yep.
if you look at the middle for Dragons of Book 2,
Winter Night.
Winter's Night. Yep. That's huge. That is like you could not fight that. You could not fight wearing something like that at all. So,
That's why
but
I
it
like
looks
Excalibur
cool.
so much, because the armor
Uh-huh.
pieces fit so well together for movement that I sort of just associate that movement armor with the High Lord armor. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So like the layers of straps and stuff.
I kind of reserved that sort of Excalibur armor for the Knights of Solamnia. That's what I was thinking. You know, really ornate. You know, like it's all been handed down. It's been custom fit depending on the status of the knight and what he can afford, or what, you know, what's been handed down. I actually broke some ground. You've seen the one I did of Aaron Talbot.
Yeah.
I have. You're still seeing my screen, right?
Yep.
Here's.
Don't open that
some.
folder right there. That's.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm just playing.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Is it loading here? We're losing. Anyways, you can.
We can see what you're looking at.
Here we go.
Yeah.
There we go. So Derek's in the middle, Brian Donner's on the right, and Aaron Talbot on the left. Yeah. So I'm kind of, they're not finished. These are work. Well, Aaron's finished, but the other two are work in progress. But I'm trying to, you know, Knight of the Crown, Knight of the Sword, Knight of the Rose.
Right.
And how would we, like, in the books, they don't really describe Derek as, he always has a sword and shield, but in the game, he's got a halberd, and that's what he uses as his weapon. And I think that's kind of neat. It's kind of interesting. And how would he differ from the other characters? He's got more status. He's got obviously more wealth, and you know,
he's also a huge douchebag.
I know. You know, in the book, he's such a terrible person, but they needed an antagonist for that book. They didn't really have one in the book, really. So they needed something. In my version of the story, he'd still be, you know, a jerk and cause a lot of problems, but he would still have some heroic moments and some kind of leadership. It's almost like I wouldn't have his decline so rapid at the end.
Yeah.
I think I'd have his decline be more gradual, because he's basically a dick at the beginning, and then he just becomes crazy at the end.
Yeah.
So let's say maybe he comes off at the beginning as a worthy ally and someone you would collaborate with, because you know, why would they join this guy to go looking for the dragon orb unless he was half decent or trustworthy, right? But he kind of comes off as a real bully and a jerk from the get-go. So let's say he starts off as being a good guy, and maybe with his knights dying, he kind of, something changes in him, and then he gets bitter and angry or power hungry, or something happens to him in his fight, or maybe he has a moment where he looks in the dragon orb and it messes him up, like it did with Lorak. Like, there's so many ways we could go with that to show him being corrupted. What do you think? Have you ever thought of that?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is he's in a sort of contest for being the next ruler of
Hmm.
all the Knights of Slamnia with Gunther Wistan. And so
Hmm.
he's a political player who is going after this dragon orb only to cement his position as being the leader of this
Hmm.
organization. That's really the only reason he's doing it. Even less so to win any manufactured war or anything. Like he just wants status. And so
Hmm.
for the soldiers following him, they're doing it because he is in a position of authority. This is a military
Hmm.
organization. Anyone below you has to follow your follow your order no matter what. So
Hmm.
when, and he's also relying on these sort of legends that the measure is sort of proponing, like, you have to go out in a blaze of glory and the gods will be with you and protect you. Even in this time when there are no gods, according to, the vast majority of people, his perspective doesn't shift at all. And so he is coming into this thinking, I need to be the hero that, like all the heroes of old in Solanic tradition, I am going to find this artifact that is going to give us the edge over every other race, including all the good races, in order to, make the Knights of Solamnia be the heroes that we all know we are. And I'm
Hmm.
not even going to let other Knights of Solamnia get in my way of doing it. He is
Hmm.
single minded in that he just wants glory, and not just glory for himself, but for the order itself. Because for the past 350 years, the order has been, you know, thrown in the mud and kicked around and joked about and ostracized and literally murdered in some cases, thrown out of your own castle, thrown out of your own hereditary lands. Like, it's not a great place to be or a great time to be in
Hmm.
Icelandia. So he is latching on to the legends and he just wants to be a living one. That's
Hmm.
how I see him. And it just, the problem is that it's very much like today. You go into modern, 2023 with 1980s sensibilities,
Hmm.
you're not going to get very far because
Hmm.
the culture has shifted in a very different way. So I think he is just faced with this shift in culture and he doesn't want to admit to it. And that's his downfall. And so he comes off as douchey and asshole and sort of
Hmm.
crazy, but the reality is he's just trying to live up to everything that he's been taught from a child.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it all makes perfect sense, and you really, I mean, you know your stuff. So that
I just
I
think
go
about
with
it too
that.
much is all.
You well, no, that's great though. That's great. I love it. I love it. I, he's almost like an anti-hero or a dark version of Huma Dragonbane, right?
Yeah.
He's the opposite of what, he has the potential at the beginning to be that hero.
Oh yeah.
He's got the backing and the drive and he's got everything he needs, but instead of making the right decision, he makes the wrong decision and it just spirals out of control. I mean, he's a great foil for Sturm
Oh
and
yeah.
he's a great character. Like he's really a good character. I mean, everyone hates him and no one I've never really seen any artwork with him except the character portraits that are in the modules,
Yeah.
and
In the
that's a shame
comics,
because
yeah.
in the comics, I didn't really read the comics that much. That was one thing I didn't really go into.
Yeah, you don't really
Um,
have to, but there's two different
mhm,
comic runs that do showcase him.
mhm,
And they don't showcase him as like an asshole or anything. I mean, how do you
mhm,
draw someone looking like an asshole? But
mhm,
he just looks like a knight.
mhm,
And that's what I like about it, is that it's his personality and his drives that make him what he is, not his
mhm,
outer appearance. So you just showcased the three different knights that are traveling with the companions down to Icewall. I've
mhm,
always imagined the Knights of Slamnia, the only real difference in their appearance may
mhm,
be etchings in their armor, but they all
mhm,
wear and look the same because they have to sort of be that seamless military face whenever you
hmm,
see them. Like that in
hmm,
my mind, I always see the Knights of Slamnia as the Excalibur Knights of the Round Table. They all wore
mhm,
full plate mail. Maybe Lancelot, had a little bit different flair. The epaulette tells you what family you're
mhm,
from. Maybe you have a banner that tells you your family or your
mhm,
your order that you're a part of, but you all
mhm,
look the
mhm.
same
Well,
by
that's what's
design, arguably.
isn't that interesting though? Because I mean, that's how you imagine it, and maybe your first exposure to Excalibur influenced your imagination
For
when
sure.
you
Yeah.
moving forward. And I love that. That's what's so great about this. And for me, I think of the practicality. Like every suit of armor is handmade,
Hmm.
custom to that person,
Right.
and so just the logistics of having every single knight with the exact same suit, except maybe with different sculptures or etchings on it, would be really unrealistic. And I think about ones. So I thought of Aaron as a poor knight.
Mhm.
You know, he's still a knight, but his choice weapon is the longbow. And as a long bowman, he wouldn't wear plate mail.
For
You know,
sure.
it would be an encumbrance to him. So maybe I looked at references for, say, knights from an earlier period where he's got chainmail and some some sort of leather with plates sewn into it. But he would still have elements, but his fighting style and his approach, he would still be an adherent of the code and the measure,
Mhm.
but he just wouldn't have the status like Derek. It's obvious that he's second to Gunther, right? Like
Mhm.
he's wealthy, he's powerful, he can afford whatever he needs or wants. He probably has 5 suits of plate mail. You know, if he was going on an
Right.
adventure, if he was going on this grand adventure, down to Ice Wall, crossing whatever, he probably would put on his second rate suit,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it would still be a full plate suit, and he'd probably insist one of these guys beside him acted as a squire and helped him get in and out of it after every day on the road, even though they're full knights,
Mhm.
just because of his vanity and his hubris. But the other 2 knights, I think they would understand the journey would be so long and so epic. They'd want to travel lightly. They'd want to be inconspicuous because knights aren't necessarily trusted and loved throughout the land, and no one
Yeah.
had been to Tarsus in forever, right?
Mhm.
They didn't even know if it was still there. So that's a pretty cool journey right there. And maybe these guys would go about it a little more practically. They wouldn't wear lots of gear. They would be more about stealth and um, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
No,
these are
I
the
like
ideas
it.
that
I
went
like
through my
that.
head.
I like,
Yeah,
yeah, I like
yeah.
how your mind is working with this.
Okay, cool. We're on the same page. But I would like to see more of the characters. I would like to eventually draw more of the characters from the series.
Yeah.
Not just the main heroes of the Lance, but other ones too, like Waylorn Wyvernsbane or Krynn and Serinda. You remember them from
Mhm.
the other modules? Lesser known characters. Silvara seems to be one that pops up. People still like drawing. I see her.
Yeah.
Uh, you
Started out
know,
as Silvart for people.
Silvart, yeah, yeah. Dargent, the dragon turned
Yeah.
Silvart or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, I love that they're in the modules themselves. There's so many neat stories, and I hope other people who are following this, maybe they get inspired to look at the original modules
Oh, I
and
hope
read
so.
them, because they're really cool. And like the Dragons of War, where they're the Battle of the High Claris Tower, like the maps
Yeah,
that come with the
dude.
module are so
They're
cool.
crazy.
It isn't it? The amount of work that went into making these games, considering it was the 80s, is really impressive.
Yeah.
And even all the story, like you can wander around the Tower of High Claris, and there's a ghost of a High Claris that you place chess with, and if you get the right chess piece, you can make something happen in the game. I don't want to give it away,
Yeah.
but there's neat things. Then you can actually conduct the whole battle. Here I am selling it to the world, but
Right.
um but what I'm getting at are the stories.
Yeah.
And I just finished in Dragons of Spring Dawning the chapter where Flint and Tasselhoff go into battle on the back of a
That's
dragon.
hilarious.
Yeah. Why
That
is it
is
hilarious?
on the dragon back?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, just
Taz is like having a well, I don't know if we're talking about the same scene where
yeah, we
Taz
are.
is like
Yeah.
they capture Baccarus.
Yep, they do. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
that I just thought that was hilarious where it was like a total accident they captured him. But Taz is like having the time of his life riding on Dragonback, just giddy and Flint's terrified, white knuckling
uh
it, like, you damn door brain of a Kender, like doorknob of a Kender, you can't handle like how excited the person he's stuck with on this Dragonback is. But the
Uh-huh.
dragon is doing his best to be like respectful to the dwarf and cater to him, but he sort of embraces the excitement of Taz, and I love that scene so much.
I love it how he flatters Flint
Yeah.
to manipulate him. And my daughter, she was laughing and chuckling throughout the whole beginning of that chapter. Just what made you, like, just to describe what the moments you described
Mhm.
of the dialogue between Tasselhoff and Flint's stubbornness and just everything about it. It's a really well written chapter, and I enjoyed it. The thing that I complain about though is the whole series is called Dragonlance.
Yeah.
It's the only time we really have a fight on the back of a dragon with the Dragonlance in the whole series,
Yeah.
in the books. And that to me feels like a wasted opportunity. And because it's all about these lances and the way it was described, and there's so much more you could do with it, like the fighting and the battle and there's one moment where they describe a good dragon got hit in the face with a lightning bolt, and so it's screaming and crashing to the ground. Its head's on fire, and the knight's holding on for dear life, and Tasselhoff's watching it all go by, and like the chaos of the battle. It's riveting, right? It's really, really cool, and those types of visuals, I think Dragonlance needs more of it. We need more of that kind of stuff, not just one hero, the hero shot with the lance, saving the day. I want to see, the cover of the book. I think Jeff Easley was the painter for The Legend of Huma, and they reused it for other products. But that was such a wonderful painting. And it really, to me, doesn't it? It just got my blood going. I love it.
Oh,
I want to see more of that stuff. I want to see that giant lance and dragons being speared and capes flying and flames and all that kind of stuff. And more good dragons. I want to see more of them, because we always see the bad guys, but we rarely see the heroes, the hero dragons. And I've yet to see a gold dragon in a Dragonlance painting. Like there's one of Gunther on top of a dragon, but it looks almost like a bronze dragon in Dragons of Light.
Right. I think it's supposed to be a gold, but yeah, I mean, to your point, you're right. I mean, there's, I mean, ultimately, when you looked at the trajectory of the story, it's, the dragon army is sweeping across the land. There's nothing in its way to stop it. And it's only these tiny little companions, Innfellows, who stumble upon the discovery of the Dissamishikal to reveal that the gods actually are around, and that gives everyone else hope to try to unify and work together and rise up against this insurmountable force that's sweeping across, very Nazi Germany like across Europe. I mean, you don't get to the dragon fighting, the really exciting stuff, until the good people of Krynn decide to abandon their biases and their bigotries and their racial hatreds and actually work together for the duration of this war, which doesn't last very long. And it's only then that you actually get to have, the dragons finally return, because they realize what their eggs were being used for. They were being blackmailed by Takesis. And so now we finally get good dragons versus bad dragons. And that's the exciting culmination of the story. But that's the end of it. That's not the heart of the story, though. That is the exciting visual aspect of the story, dragon v dragon combat. The real, I think, purpose of the story is to show that it's possible, regardless of where you come from, to step up and represent others in a positive way and work together regardless of your backgrounds to do something, whatever good means to you. Do something good together. And ultimately, I think that's the story they were telling, not necessarily the minutia of the war. I think if anyone rewrote these stories today, it would be all about the war aspect and the dragon v dragon combat, because that's the titillating part of it. That's the really exciting bit. But the heart of the story, I think, would then be lacking, because you don't get those moments where Tanis is yelling at Raistlin or talking shit about him behind his back, and then the next second turning to him asking for his advice. You wouldn't get those really minutiae moments of Flint talking shit to Taz's face and then desperately terrified that he's going to die when a beam falls on him in Tarsus. Or you wouldn't get those moments of Tanis almost murdering Barum the Everman because he thought that he killed his mentor, his father figure in Flint in God's Home. You wouldn't get those moments of incredible heart that make us as the reader cry reading them if it's just about the excitement of war, I mean, you could probably do like a Saving Private Ryan moment, but
yeah, well, it's about the characters, and we love the characters, and we follow them on their journey. The war's happening. I would just like to see a little bit more of the dragon part of it, just to satisfy my.
It's fun. It's awesome.
It's fun, but I hear with the saga itself. I mean, it's still going, and it's been 30, 40 years. It's going strong. I mean, here I am still drawing it, and I still have the same passion for it that I did when I was a kid, right? I love this stuff. And so it worked. Whatever they did, they captured lightning in a bottle, and it worked. And now we just want to expand on it, or maybe talk about the parts that they still have room to touch on. Did you ever play the modules?
No, actually,
No?
I not at all. I own them. I know them. I desperately, I'm actually planning on running them after I'm done running the new 5th edition module, but I'm going to run them in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 1st edition, like the original modules. But
Ooh,
no, I've
okay.
never played through them myself.
I same. I have them. Well, I wanted to play them, but no one would play them with me when I was younger, right? Like it was too much. Long story, but anyways, one summer I had a lot of time to kill, and I ran through them the first 6 or 7. Just did it myself. You know, it
Wow.
wasn't role playing. It was just,
Yeah.
okay, this is an encounter, and then rolling the dice and going through the encounters and just going through it. I stopped at Dragons of War after that one. I mean, I was wandering on the High Claris Tower, but that's, I ran out of steam at that point. But
Yeah.
and I did breeze through it. It's not like I went through it with a fine tooth comb, but that's as close as I've ever come. I would be really interested to hear other people tell stories about it, how their adventure played out differently from the books. And I really enjoyed the stories from the authors and how they talk about how some of the characters evolved based off of them play testing the modules, like Raslin's
Yeah.
voice, or that's a pretty good example, or the encounter with Bupu in
Yes.
Zach Saroth, right? I love that. And I love how they took those elements from the game and they put it into the books and sort of canonized it. And I think that idea that's very interesting to me, how it grew organically, and it really gives a lot more validity to the story. It just feels realer to me. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I love it. And I think about which parts of the story would I like to see again. Like I know Dragons of Desolation #4, they go into the Flying Citadel inside a dwarven kingdom in the mountain. That's just such a wild idea. I love that idea, and I'd love to see, how did that adventure play out. Was that ever covered in the novels at all, or some of the secondary
Yeah,
products?
it was in the Lost Chronicles, Dragons of Deceit. Hold on, I'm Dragons of Dwarven Depths is what I'm thinking of.
Okay.
So that's the novel title, but yeah, they talk about their entire journey of migrating the survivors of Pax Tharkaz. We should probably move to video at this point and wind down the conversation. But
Sure.
going back,
Do you want me to
yeah,
Do you want me to cancel this?
Yeah.
Stop sharing my screen?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's do that.
Right.
So they go from the it was just showing Tasselhoff's face and stuff. Migrating
it's really dark now.
finding safety for it is finding safety for all of the survivors of the slaves of Pax Tharkaz in Thorbarden, and then also, of course, Raceland, Tika, and Karaman going off to Skull Mountain, Fisdanalus's fortress. And then ultimately Flint finding the Hammer of Karis and delivering it to the Hylar leader in Thorbarden. And yeah, they do the entire experience, the entire adventure going in there. Of course, spoiler for everyone who hasn't read or looked at the modules at all, Verminar does not die in Pax Tharkaz. He actually survives and he renews his assault in Thorbarden. So we have this great resurgence of one of my favorite High Lords, Verminard, following the people that got away and trying to exact revenge on them. And then that's ultimately where he probably meets his fate. But it's a great module, and it's a great story if you've never read it. I highly recommend it. And ultimately, it sort of plays on some of the tropes of what it means to have a connection with someone, what brings comfort to people, like these ideas about Karaman and Raceland taking care of each other, and how Karaman would do shadow puppets. And so them play testing the module, and they're talking about how, in the depths of Thorbarden, you have all this light emanating up from lava, and then, Verminard and his dragon coming out, and then you would have Karaman saying, "Hey, Race, look, shadow puppets, and look at the bunny on the wall." And he would make a bunny shadow puppet with his hands to reflect on the wall and get a little humor in the game session. And that ended up being this through line that was carried through with the characters in different stories and short stories and stuff. But it's the playfulness of it. It's the connection, the genuine care. And even if there's an overt sort of animosity presented between the characters, I think that module and that story brings out so much character development that is incredibly necessary, especially between, surprisingly enough, Sturm and Raceland, who are set up as straight up antagonists to each other. But it's that book that is revealed why Sturm acts so harshly to Raceland, and the affection that Raceland actually has for Sturm, and the respect he has for him. It's a beautiful novel. And it's a great
I
module.
have to read it now.
Yeah,
I haven't read it.
You're
I've played them. I've got the module, but I got to read that now.
I guarantee you.
I didn't know it was. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. Anyway, this has been a ton of fun. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm very, very impressed with your work, and I highly recommend anyone who has not sat through all of this, and we did not filter through all of the images and stuff about DL6 Dragons of Ice that he's worked on, but Mike has done a wonderful job of bringing to life a module that arguably is sort of tossed aside by most people because they're following the heroes and companions over to Sylvanesty for the dream sequence of Lorac rather than focusing on the recovery of not just the Dragon Orb, but also the broken shaft of the Dragonlance, which is the first reference to a Dragonlance in an entire series called Dragonlance, which is kind of weird. So, you brought up the idea of it before, but definitely go check out his artwork. Mike, you're a fantastic artist, and I've had such a great time talking with you. We should do this again sometime. Just sort of hang out and just
love
chat.
That. This is great. I'd love it. And thank you very much for your kind words. And anytime you want to talk Dragonlance, let me know. I'd be happy to do it. And if people enjoyed this and maybe there's something they would like to see or they want to see more art, we can draw and talk. I'm totally open to it. It'd be a lot of fun, and I look forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in live. We really appreciate your interaction throughout the course of this conversation and just spending your Saturday with us when you could have literally done it with anyone else. It means a lot. Thank you very much. That is going to do it for the interview. What did you think of his work? Did you really like the sort of realistic take on these classic Elmore characters? Did you ever play through the original modules? Let us know in the comments below. Of course, you can always reach out at info@dlsaga.com, or again, if you're watching this after the fact, leave a comment. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click that like button. And all of that goes to showcasing other Dragonlance fans all of the work and production that is done on this channel. It goes to help us a lot, but more importantly, it creates a sense of community around something that there really hasn't been one in the YouTube space before. And I'm very proud of what we've all worked together to create here. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga. Thank you very much for joining in that. Until next time, Slán Javar.